Hey, everybody. I hope you're doing well. This is going to be an in-depth, long analysis of this particular Mandela effect. Actually, it's a set of Mandela effects intertwined. So what do you call this? Everybody I asked called it a candelabra. I called it a candelabra, but apparently it's always been candelabra without the R. However, there's tons and tons and tons of residual evidence for candelabra. I'll just go through these real fast. I've highlighted. May not be easy to see them, but I want to show you a whole bunch of them. This is, here the Vatican Museum calls it candelabra, but everybody seemingly visiting the Vatican calls it candelabra, arbra, and so forth. Here's a bunch more candelabra here. This is an interesting tree, candelabra tree or bush, euphorbia. It creates terrible burns and blisters, and it'll even blind you. Well, what does that sound like? I never heard of a tree or plant that was that vicious. Well, this one, the giant hogweed, many people felt was a Mandela effect. I first found out about it in late summer or early fall, and I was shocked. I never heard of such a thing. This thing is really tough to clear out because you've got to basically wear like a hazmat suit in order to deal with it, or else you can get horrible burns. You can even be blinded, according to the people in Montreal and Canada. Cause blindness. Wikipedia disagrees, but I'm going to go with what they say in Canada because supposedly it first came to North America through Canada. Well, when I first looked into this, it was only in Canada. And then a month later, it had been in New England for some years. Now it's been in New England since like 1917. It's like spreading like crazy, but back in time. We've seen this kind of thing happening with other Mandela effects, like earlier dates of inventions than we ever remembered. So, but this is something that I've been researching over the last year, and every time I look into it, it's been in North America longer, in different states longer, and now it's in the West Coast too. It's spread across the country at this blistering pace, which is a horrible pun because, well, this is horrible. I apologize for that pun because this is not fun at all. These turn into black or red scars that can last for years. It's completely nutty. Okay, well, here's more examples. This is interesting because Liberace, there was a film made about him, Behind the Candelabra. Notice it's singular, the candelabra. And here we have in a listing of films, here in somebody's blog, the candelabra, even USA Today, Behind the Candelabra, arbra. And it's also singular. That will come into play in a minute. Here's some more, and it just goes on and on. Well, I was looking for a smoking gun, and then I found Alan's website. He was in a band called Candelabra. Well, that's pretty cool. Well, there may have been a couple bands named Candelabra. Here's a band. I don't know if it was Alan's band or not. Candelabra. And here is a little bit better view of it. And you can see even here, Candelabra. And here's a better image. Candelabra, burning at both ends. Here's the candelabra right here. And here is the LP itself, candelabra. And then it gets weirder. This is not actually a candelabra. Even abra. It's not even that today. Today, and this is new as of the last 6 months or so, this is a candelabrum. A candelabrum. This is not a candelabra or a candelabra. It's a candelabrum. That is the official word, and that has only ever been the official word for one of these. That's a candelabrum, candelabrum. Altogether, in plural, they are candelabra. Now, But remember, behind the candelabra, it was the candelabra, and Liberace only had one on his piano. But I imagine the way this is going, we're going to start seeing images that never existed before that have multiple candelabrums on them. Let's check out now some interesting things about the word candelabrum, which is the current word that only ever was, starting in early 19th century, used in English from Latin, directly from Latin. I mean, scientific terms come from Latin, maybe engineering, medical. But check this out. A related search, it's giving us a second choice of a related search, candelabra versus candelabra. Well, what's going on here? I've done a lot of searches, affect versus effect, that kind of thing, where you're trying to figure out which one to use. But you're not going to do a search, gee, should I spell it candelabra or should I spell it candelabra? I mean, that's just absurd. What happened probably was one of these said Abram, or maybe one of these said Arbra. You're not going to have this search. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it is evidence that there's some hocus pocus going on here. In the etymology of candelabrum, the suffix, the brum part, could mean instrument, vessel, place, or person. So candle instrument, candle vessel, candle place, candle person. None of those really make sense. Here's a sample definition, one of many. We could go through those, but let's now move on. Merriam-Webster does something funny. If you look up candelabra, you'll get to candelabrum. But under candelabrum, it's going to define it as candelabra, which is totally whacked. And the first known use, 1811. But then if you go to candelabra, then it's a branched candlestick since 1805. So the incorrect and plural form, the less commonly used form, supposedly showed up first, and then the current and only ever was singular showed up after that. So that doesn't make sense. And then in Google Ngrams, we see that the plural form, supposedly, is showing up much more than the singular form. Except the singular form, if you use Ngrams, usually shows up 5 to 10 times more often than the plural, but here it's reversed. Also, 1805, 1811, you see that these were already in use, going back to about 1763 or so. If we look up the etymology in French, then we find 1762 is when it came into French usage. Okay, that fits this graph to a T, suggesting, again, that this came from French like these words would normally come, and appearing in French as early as, 1694, in the architectural sense, as an arbor. Let's look at an arbor. So these are arbors, where you would grow roses over it, so on. So it'd be in a tree-like setting. Now, arbor, the standard definition of arbor is now an axillary spindle on which something revolves, a device holding a tool in a lathe. Huh? What? I mean, it's like there's this instability in the meanings of things that's increasing. That's a new one. I only saw that one today or yesterday. So here is the translation if you wanted to see that. 1762 in the form of candelabra, since 1798 in the modern form with an accent. Well, what does a candelabra look like? Well, they varied in form. This is in the ancient world. highly decorated with stems and leaves of plants, parts of animals, flowers, and the like. Well, we got flowers, stems, leaves. What does that sound like? Well, we get an interesting boost here. Old English had a term not deriving, not connected to candelabrum, but had a different term, candle true. Candle tree. Well, that's starting to make some sense. And by the way, this definition included French and Old French and then Latin back, say, 6 months ago. So this has changed. What do we think this is? Is this a candle tree? Makes a lot of sense. Is it a candle place or a candle vessel or a candle instrument or a candle person? No, it's a candle tree. These are even called branches. Even to this day, they're called branches. And even now, we can find candelabra with twigs sticking out or branches, flowers, or all of the above. What do we make of all this? For one, this is a candle tree. In French, candle arbre. Arbre meaning tree. It would have come into French and then from French into English, and that's why we called it candelabra instead of candelabra, or today, candelabrum. It's ridiculous, absurd to the max. When I was trying to do this video yesterday, things really tweaked out. Some definitions would be different at the beginning of the day and different later in the day and so forth. There was one glitchy thing especially that happened, and I will show that to you next. It was as if the Mandela effect was trying to decide, is the singular candelabra or candelabrum? I'm not doing anything here. It's just I can't handle it. It's like going by candelabrum. Wow. Oh. It was freaking out earlier in a little way, but this is really interesting. I typed candelabra, I switched to candelabrum, and then I noticed that there were two cursors, like you can see, but it wasn't freaking this much. But there two cursors were flashing, so I decided to turn on the screen record to see what would happen, and then after I just did a little bit more, as you saw, then it's just like completely freaking out. Wow. So what might be some takeaways? I like FIT, form, intertwining, and time. The form of a thing, like a candle tree, can tell us, hey, it actually is a candle arbor, candle tree. Secondly, intertwining seems to be happening, and maybe happening a lot more with Mandela effects, where several of them are intertwined. And this could tell us a lot about dynamics of what's going on and clue us into what it's all about, possibly. Finally, time can be tracked, as in the histories as they change can be tracked. It might be difficult to do this, but we haven't really tried yet, consciously, actively. So these are some things I think are very useful to bear in mind as you're doing Mandela effect research or watching for Mandela effects and so forth. I hope you have a great day, and I'll talk with you hopefully sooner.